Listen carefully. Arthur Schopenhauer once declared that the intellect is like a light in darkness. The brighter it shines, the more shadows it reveals around it. If you've ever felt that your intelligence creates a barrier between you and others, today you will discover why this happens and how to transform this knowledge into power. The great philosopher understood something most people refuse to acknowledge. Society doesn't just ignore intelligence, it actively fears and rejects it. This isn't coincidence. This isn't personal failure. This is the fundamental nature of human social dynamics, and once you understand it, everything changes. If you're ready to understand why brilliant minds face social resistance and how to use this understanding for your personal growth, leave an understood in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications so you don't miss any deep philosophical analysis. The problem runs deeper than you imagine. We live in a society that preaches the value of intelligence while systematically punishing those who truly possess it. Think about your own experience. How many times have you simplified your language to avoid making others uncomfortable? How often have you hidden your interests, your insights, your genuine thoughts because you learned they create distance? How frequently have you been labeled as arrogant, pretentious, or difficult simply for thinking independently? Schopenhauer observed this phenomenon with ruthless clarity. He wrote that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. This wasn't pessimism, this was profound psychological insight. The philosopher understood that authentic intellectual expression triggers something primal and uncomfortable in most people. It forces them to confront their own limitations, their own conformity, their own intellectual laziness. And rather than face this uncomfortable truth, they choose to attack the source. The mechanisms are predictable and universal. When you express an original thought, you're not just sharing an idea, you're demonstrating that independent thinking is possible. This terrifies people who have built their entire identity around fitting in, following trends, and accepting received wisdom without question. Your very existence becomes a threat to their worldview. Your intellectual curiosity makes their complacency visible. Your depth makes their shallowness obvious. This creates what Schopenhauer called the hedgehog's dilemma. The closer people try to get to each other, the more they hurt each other with their differences. But for the intelligent person, this dilemma is amplified. You don't just have different preferences or opinions. You have a fundamentally different relationship with reality itself. You see patterns others miss. You question assumptions others accept blindly. You pursue truth while others pursue comfort. The social punishment for this is swift and merciless. Envy disguises itself as moral indignation. Incomprehension masquerades as sophistication. The mediocre masses, as Schopenhauer called them, unite in their resentment against anyone who dares to think differently. They create elaborate social mechanisms to suppress originality and reward conformity. They shame intellectual curiosity as antisocial behavior. They reframe independent thinking as selfishness. But here's what Schopenhauer understood that most people never will. This rejection isn't your failure, it's your validation. When society pushes back against your intelligence, it's confirming that your mind operates on a different level. The very fact that your thoughts disturb others proves their power. The discomfort you create simply by being yourself is evidence that you're accessing something most people cannot. The philosopher taught us that human beings are driven by what he called the will to live, a blind, irrational force that prioritizes survival over truth, comfort over growth, conformity over excellence. Most people are slaves to this will. They think they're making conscious choices, but they're really just following biological and social programming. They avoid anything that challenges their existing beliefs because challenge requires energy. And energy is a scarce resource they prefer to save for immediate pleasures and social positioning. Your intelligence threatens this entire system. When you think independently, you demonstrate that the will can be transcended. When you pursue truth regardless of social consequences, you prove that conscious choice is possible. When you embrace solitude over shallow connection, You show that internal fulfillment doesn't require external validation. This is terrifying to people who have never experienced genuine autonomy. Schopenhauer called this rare ability to transcend the will aesthetic contemplation, the capacity to observe reality objectively, without the distortion of personal desire or social pressure. This is what true intelligence provides, the ability to see clearly. But clear vision comes with a price. You see not just beauty and truth, but also deception and mediocrity. You recognize not just possibility, but also waste and limitation. You understand not just what could be, but also why it probably won't be. This knowledge isolates you in ways that less perceptive people never experience. They live in comfortable illusions, surrounded by others who share the same blindness. You live with uncomfortable clarity, often alone in your understanding. They find meaning in social rituals and collective beliefs. You must create meaning through individual contemplation and personal growth. They derive identity from group membership. You must forge identity through self-knowledge and authentic expression. The resentment you encounter isn't really about your intelligence. It's about the freedom your intelligence represents. When you demonstrate the ability to think for yourself, you implicitly suggest that others could do the same. This possibility terrifies people who have built their entire sense of security around following others. Your independence reminds them of their dependence. Your originality highlights their imitation. Your depth exposes their superficiality. Schopenhauer experienced this personally and intensely. His philosophical insights were largely ignored during his lifetime. Academic institutions rejected his work. Social circles found him difficult and strange. He lived much of his life in intellectual solitude, convinced of his own genius, while society remained indifferent or hostile. Yet he never abandoned his pursuit of truth. He never simplified his ideas to make them more palatable. He never sacrificed intellectual integrity for social acceptance. This brings us to the practical wisdom Schopenhauer offers for navigating the social challenges of superior intelligence. First, understand that seeking approval from those who cannot understand you is not just futile, it's self-destructive. You cannot maintain intellectual integrity while constantly adapting to inferior minds. You cannot preserve your authentic self while perpetually accommodating others' limitations. You cannot develop your full potential while constraining yourself to fit social expectations. The philosopher taught that solitude isn't just acceptable for the intelligent person. It's essential. In solitude, you can think without interruption, feel without judgment, and be without performance. Solitude allows your mind to operate at its natural level without the constant friction of translation and simplification. In solitude, you don't have to explain yourself, defend yourself, or diminish yourself. You can simply exist as you are. But Schopenhauer's solitude wasn't mere isolation, it was productive withdrawal. He used his alone time for deep reading, rigorous thinking, and creative work. He understood that if you're going to be separate from others, you must make that separation meaningful. Loneliness becomes powerful when it serves a higher purpose. Isolation becomes valuable when it enables superior achievement. This leads to another crucial insight. Your intelligence carries responsibility. Schopenhauer believed that those capable of clear thinking have an obligation to pursue truth and share it, regardless of social reception. Your intellectual gifts aren't just personal advantages, they're tools for advancing human understanding. When you hide your intelligence to fit in, you're not just limiting yourself, you're depriving the world of your unique contributions. The philosopher also understood the importance of finding your intellectual tribe, however small it might be. Throughout history, brilliant minds have found each other across time and distance through their work. Books become bridges between isolated thinkers. Ideas create connections that transcend social barriers. When you develop your intelligence and express it authentically, you attract others who operate on your level, even if they're rare. Consider the great minds throughout history who faced similar challenges. Galileo was persecuted for his astronomical discoveries. Darwin was vilified for his evolutionary theory. Tesla died alone and impoverished despite his revolutionary inventions. Van Gogh sold only one painting during his lifetime. These weren't failures of intelligence. These were successes of intellectual courage in societies that feared new ideas. Each of these individuals faced the same choice you face now: conform and be accepted, or think freely and be rejected. They chose freedom over acceptance, and history vindicated their decision. Their ideas outlived their critics. Their contributions transcended their contemporary social status. Their intellectual courage became their immortal legacy. Schopenhauer teaches us that the path of authentic intelligence requires what he called the courage to be alone. This doesn't mean seeking isolation for its own sake. It means accepting isolation as the price of intellectual honesty. When you refuse to compromise your thinking for social comfort, you will often find yourself standing alone. But this solitary position isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the natural consequence of seeing clearly in a world that prefers comfortable blindness. The modern world has only intensified these dynamics. Social media rewards conformity through likes and shares. Educational systems prioritize compliance over creativity. Workplace cultures punish independent thinking while claiming to value innovation. The mechanisms of social control have become more sophisticated, but the underlying pattern remains the same. Intelligence that challenges the status quo faces systematic suppression. But technology also offers new opportunities for the intelligent person. You can find like-minded individuals across geographical boundaries. You can access vast libraries of knowledge without institutional gatekeepers. You can create and share your ideas without traditional publishing barriers. The same systems that enable mass conformity also enable individual expression for those bold enough to use them. The key is understanding that your intellectual nature isn't a problem to be solved, it's a gift to be developed. Society's discomfort with your intelligence reveals its limitations, not yours. The fact that your thoughts disturb others indicates their power, not their error. The isolation you experience isn't punishment. It's the natural environment for original thinking. Schopenhauer advised cultivating what he called aesthetic distance, the ability to observe human behavior, including social rejection, with the detachment of a scientist studying natural phenomena. When people respond negatively to your intelligence, don't take it personally. They're simply demonstrating the psychological mechanisms he described centuries ago. Their behavior is predictable, understandable, and ultimately irrelevant to your intellectual development. This perspective transforms your entire relationship with social rejection. Instead of seeing it as evidence of your inadequacy, you recognize it as confirmation of your advancement. Instead of trying to fix yourself to fit in better, you focus on developing yourself to think more clearly. Instead of seeking approval from those who cannot understand you, you pursue truth regardless of its social reception. The philosopher also emphasized the importance of maintaining compassion for those who reject your intelligence. They're not evil, they're simply operating according to their nature. Just as you cannot help seeing patterns and connections others miss, they cannot help feeling threatened by perspectives they cannot comprehend. Understanding this prevents bitterness from poisoning your intellectual development. But compassion doesn't require self-sacrifice. You can understand others' limitations without accommodating them. You can feel empathy for their discomfort without compromising your authentic expression. You can maintain kindness while preserving boundaries. Schopenhauer teaches that true wisdom includes knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. This brings us to perhaps the most crucial practical insight: the transformation of loneliness into solitude. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the pleasure of being alone. The difference isn't circumstantial, it's psychological. When you're lonely, you focus on what you're missing from others. When you're in solitude, you focus on what you're gaining from yourself. Schopenhauer mastered this transformation through three practices that remain relevant today. First, he developed a rich inner life through reading, thinking, and creative work. His solitude became productive rather than empty. Second, he found meaning in his pursuit of truth rather than in social validation. His purpose came from within rather than from others' approval. Third, he accepted his nature completely rather than fighting it. He embraced being different rather than struggling to fit in. These practices allowed him to write some of the most influential philosophical works in history, despite social rejection during his lifetime. His ideas about human nature, consciousness, and society continue to influence thinkers centuries later. His intellectual courage in the face of social hostility became his greatest legacy. He proved that authentic intelligence, properly developed, ultimately transcends the social barriers that initially constrain it. The same potential exists for you. Your intelligence isn't a burden, it's your greatest asset. Your capacity for independent thinking isn't a social liability, it's your unique contribution to human progress. Your ability to see clearly isn't a source of isolation, it's a path to authentic connection with others who share your intellectual courage. But realizing this potential requires accepting Schopenhauer's most challenging insight. You must choose between social acceptance and intellectual authenticity. You cannot have both simultaneously. You cannot think independently while constantly seeking approval from dependent minds. You cannot pursue truth while avoiding its social consequences. You cannot be yourself while pretending to be someone else. This choice terrifies most people because it demands genuine autonomy. It requires building your identity on internal rather than external foundations. It means finding meaning in personal growth rather than social positioning. It demands the courage to stand alone when necessary and the wisdom to know when that necessity has arrived. Yet this choice also liberates you from the endless anxiety of trying to fit in where you don't belong. It frees you from the exhausting performance of pretending to be less than you are. It releases you from the futile pursuit of approval from those incapable of truly understanding you. It allows you to direct your energy toward developing your actual potential rather than managing others' perceptions. Schopenhauer understood that this liberation comes with responsibilities. When you accept your intellectual nature, you also accept the obligation to develop it fully. When you embrace your capacity for independent thinking, you commit to using that capacity for meaningful purposes. When you choose authenticity over conformity, you become responsible for making that authenticity valuable to yourself and others. The philosopher believed that highly intelligent individuals serve as humanity's advance guard, exploring intellectual territories that others will eventually inhabit. Your willingness to think independently today creates possibilities that others will embrace tomorrow. Your courage to stand alone now builds bridges that others will cross later. Your acceptance of social rejection in pursuit of truth advances human understanding in ways that may not be recognized until long after you're gone. This perspective transforms your entire relationship with your intelligence. Instead of seeing it as a personal burden, you recognize it as a collective gift. Instead of trying to hide it to fit in, you develop it to serve a higher purpose. Instead of resenting the isolation it creates, you accept that isolation as the price of advancement. Instead of seeking validation from those who cannot understand you, you find meaning in the work itself. In the comments, share a situation where you felt your intelligence was misunderstood and how you plan to use this new perspective. Let's create a community of free minds. Remember, as Schopenhauer said, a man can be himself only while he is alone. Your intelligence isn't a burden, it's your greatest gift to the world. Society may fear what it doesn't understand, but you don't need its approval to be who you really are. The very fact that your thoughts disturb others proves their power. The isolation you experience isn't punishment. It's the natural environment for original thinking. Embrace your intellectual nature completely. Develop it without apology. Use it without compromise. The world needs your unique perspective, whether it realizes it or not.